Good morning, everybody. Hope your week has gone well. Welcome back to the Thursday session of the two topics that we've been covering this month. Tuesday, we talked about selection lists, and you can see kind of the things that we covered. Most of you, I think all of you that are logged in were with us on Tuesday. But today we're going to talk about modifiers. And these are modifiers are add-on things that you can do for that are not ordinarily covered as a part of the actual pricing formulas. So we're going to learn how product modifiers can enhance your estimate and order entry process. We'll create a couple, actually we're going to create three different modifiers, and then we'll associate that with, associate each of them with a product or more. We'll talk about using modifiers to kind of visually alter how they do or don't appear when you print an estimate or an order or a work order. And then we'll actually look at some estimates that illustrate everything that we're going to be talking about today. Now I'm going to change my view to control. Everybody should be seeing control with a funny looking screen that I have open.
We can, Paul. We can see it.
The reason I want to start there is that just like on Tuesday, there are very subtle differences in how not how the modifiers work, but how they are accessed and set up, or it's very, very slightly different between the two versions. So I'm going to, just like Tuesday, I'm going to bounce back and forth a couple of times between the relevant versions of control. The one that I've got open now is referred to as the data set, the 2.0 data set. And how you can tell that on your system is to go up to setup, in pricing setup, in all pricing, and then on the left-hand side in the first column, choose user constants. And if you see universal product options and look in the data set version row right here, if you see that 290 or something with it that begins with a 2, that means that you are using the 2. Something to version 2 something. If you do not see the universal product options, but instead see the a row in that second column that's labeled product info, you're going to see a data set version. And if you see 3 and then point and then something, that means that you're using the version 3 data set. So that's just kind of an introductory comment on how to know for sure what data set you're using. I'm going to close this now, and we'll look at some of these in just a second. But just some introductory comments about modifiers. Some of this is not earth-shattering, but it might be helpful to you from an understanding standpoint. First of all, what are product modifiers? Well, they enable adding on to your pricing for goods and services, as I said, that are not part of a particular product. So if you're using a wide format print product or digital print product, there are things that are covered in that product, in that formulas, and then there are a wide variety of things that are not covered. And it's the modifiers then that you can create that that help do some of that add-on. Now, they also can be used to just visually enhance or restrict from being seen on a work order or an estimate. So they can be helpful from a production standpoint for work orders to let the workforce see what all the add-ons are, but yet not show them on an estimate or on an order. And it also is an excellent means covering things that you want to convey that you're not actually going to charge for. So some typical examples of modifiers that you might see are rush jobs. I mean, they're common frequently that you'll have someone that will have a job or a portion of a job that that is a rush. And the dilemma is always, how do you charge for that? Sometimes there might be a need to charge extra for special order materials. There might be an abundance of things that you, from a labor standpoint, that you need to charge extra for, maybe for the design work or for printing or finishing or perhaps others. Similarly, from an installation perspective or service perspective, you might want to charge for ladders, or you may simply just want to note that you're using a ladder, or you need to use a ladder. You might need to convey that it's being worked on, installed. It's going to be at ground level. Again, most of that kind of stuff you may or may not charge for, but it more is important to convey to your production and installing staff. Now, how do product modifiers work? Well, first of all, a particular modifier may be associated with one or many different products. So a modifier can't be used unless it is specifically associated with one or more products. When you try to use a modifier, depending on the data set, you're either going to see an item that's labeled add-ons, or you're going to see one that's going to be labeled options. And again, that's a differentiation between the two different data sets. As I said a couple seconds ago, modifiers may or may not actually result in additional charges. How do they work? How do you handle the pricing? The simplest is no charge. The next one, you just simply give a value that you're going to charge an extra $10 or $15 or $15 or $100. It's just a value that you enter that the modifier would interpret as, this is the price that you want to attach. Modifier pricing can be more complex. It may be the result of saying, I need an extra half hour for design work. So the part, then you got the time that you're using, and then that modifier would be associated with a specific labor part. And then that part is going to have a cost element to it, and it's going to have a markup element to it, just like the regular parts being used by your digital printer or the design products. So the price would be calculated based on the amount of time, for example, plus the labor part, the hourly rate for that labor part, and the hourly markup for that labor part. Sometimes modifiers, to use one, all you need to do is put a check mark. Sometimes you actually have to put in a value. So how you choose them depends on how you answer a question. And that question is either going to be answered by a check mark, or it's going to be answered by entering a value. And then, as I've said a couple times, you may or may not include some of the modifiers that are being used, may or may not be visually represented in the estimate or at an order or work order. So to create a modifier from scratch, we're going to do just barely touch on this, and then we'll get into more details, okay? So you're going to go up to setup, then you're going to go to pricing setup, and then you're going to do all pricing. And over on the left hand or the first column, you got modifiers. So let's expand this second column here. These represent different categories. And this may look different between the two data sets. So don't panic if you don't see that in your particular one. So inside these three categories, there are some modifiers, these half a dozen or more that are here. Now, you can create a new category up here at the very top that would be the equivalent of these three that are here, but it would just appear as a fourth category. You can take these items within a category and create a subcategory. So there may be a primary level and then a sub level and then one or more modifiers associated with the sub level. Or thirdly, you can say, I want to create a new modifier. I'm going to close my office door. My wife just left and the dog's upstairs not happy. So to create a new modifier, we'll just touch quickly on these different components that make up a modifier. So we're going to walk just quickly through these first four tabs. The modifier code is simply the name that you want to associate with it. The category, depending on which one of these primary categories or subcategories you have selected, it's going to represent the category that this new modifier is going to be associated with. The active button says that you want to actively use it. When you enter the modifier code, the default is that the print as is going to be the same name. That's the default. You can change that print as and have it be whatever you want it to be. Now, every modifier is going to be presented to you as an add-on or as an option in the products in the form of a question. So how many hours or how many, is this a rush job? Is it a ground level installation? So there's always going to be a question, and that's what this question label represents. Sort level, this simply helps you organize by placing a higher priority perhaps on the more frequently used modifiers so that they appear more at the top of the list, so to speak. Now, in these items here, you're going to choose one of the three, okay? It's either going to be answered, the question is either going to be answered in the form of a check box being checked, or you're going to use a spinner that's going to allow you to choose a value or enter a value, or you're going to use a drop-down list, okay? The pricing, it's going to use one of these three. You're either going to use standard cost plus pricing, which rarely you're going to do. It's going to use the suggested pricing from a particular part, and we'll illustrate one of those, or you're going to use a formula, and then you would enter the formula in this gray area. The products, you're going to just go through. If you create a new one, you're going to start adding and choose a list out of, by saying I want to attach that part or that product, maybe this one and maybe this one. So now you've said, I want this new modifier to be used for these three different products. So the modifier question would be represented as an add-on or as an option for those three products. You can, if you have names here, if you've used one and you don't want to continue to use it for that particular product, then you would go to the products tab, select the one that you want to remove, and just simply say remove, and then it will take it out of the list of available options or add-ons for a particular for a particular product. Parts, if you're creating a modifier that is going to use a part, then you would associate and choose the part, just like you did the products. Okay, so if you're going to use the need installation labor, then that you would associate the appropriate part or parts. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is kind of pause here, and we're going to actually create 3 different modifiers. Okay. The first one I'm going to label as a rush job. And that is going to be a modifier that will be used at the line item level. So if you get an order or that you're doing and the customer says, I need this one today, then you may elect to apply a rush charge. And I've seen some people that have done a rush modifier with just an absolute value, $10, $15, $20. The one that we will illustrate is you would enter a percentage, like 5%, 10%, 15%, and it would take the calculated price of that line item and apply the percentage that you entered, and that would be the amount for the modifier that it would create. The other one that we're going to illustrate is additional print labor. Now that one is going to be associated with a part, a labor part, with an equipment part or a labor part. I'm sorry, and you're going to enter the value of the added time, like a quarter of an hour or a half an hour. And then the last one that we're going to illustrate is one that is simply intended to convey that a particular installation is going to be at ground level. And that one will be illustrated in the form of no value, no price being added to it. Now, just to get started before we actually create the respective 3 estimates, this particular, let's go back over here to the estimate. This is an estimate that I created. Line item 1 has no modifiers. Line item 2 is exactly the same pricing for a 148 by 96 banner, but I've applied a rush charge to it. That was calculated. Third one, again, is the same for the same banner, and I've added a modifier for additional print labor of $21.50. And again, that was calculated. The fourth one is that I'm installing this banner at ground level, and there's no charge applied to it. Now notice on line 2 that nothing prints. It's just the bullet for the creation of the banner in this case. So there's no other additional information that's conveyed here. Notice on the third one and the fourth one that there is information that's added to and that will be printed on the estimate, on the order, or on the work order. Okay, and that's intended to kind of illustrate the flexibility that you have on using a modifier with or without a price, but then how you present that to the customer, and separately, how might you present that to the client on their estimate or on their order. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave that open because I'm going to come back to it. So now we're going to go through the process of how I might create the a rush order modifier. Went to setup, pricing, setup, all pricing, and then I'm coming over to modifier setup. And you can create a modifier from scratch, or you can cheat and find one that's similar and clone it, and then just make the changes to it that you want. So this first one, there's some other modifiers that I've hidden that are old ones. So there's an example of one. There's an example of one. I could have taken either of these two and cloned them and then created my new one, or I could take one and simply rename it and then make the changes that I want. Okay, so you would rename it and then get into the edit mode and make your changes. So I'm going to select this one and pretend that I did the rename, and this is what I renamed it, Rush Job. And now I need to go through and make my changes to the to make it work the way I want it to work. So I'm going to edit that. So there's the modifier name, the category that it belongs to. This is the question that the customer, or that you would see on the when you go to use this modifier. Is this a rush job? Such as enter 5 for 5%, 10 for 10%, 15 for 15%, etc. I didn't really play with the sort level. I left it high. I left it, I selected the spinner because I'm entering a value that I want to represent the percentage. Okay, so that's the way it would be interpreted. Now in the pricing tab, this is where you tell the system how this modifier is going to work. So what I've said is I want to apply a formula to that modifier. And I just selected the FX builder out here so you can see it a little bit better. This is the expression that I would have to enter in order to take the calculated pre-discount price for whatever item might be, and then I'm going to take that pre-discount price and I'm going to multiply it by the value that was entered, 5, 10, 15, and that's just an absolute number. So in order to express that as a percentage, I just take the value that was entered and divide it by 100. Okay, so it takes the pre-calculated price, multiplies that by the value that that you chose out of the spinner or entered in that spinner thing, and then I'm dividing that by 100 to make it a percentage. Very, very simple on how that modifier is going to work. Now the products, this is one that's been in the system for a long, long, long time. So I left the whole big list of all the products that this modifier can be used for. And the one that I'm going to illustrate is this one right here. We're going to actually apply it and look at it, how it works on a wide format print. And then finally on this one, in the parts tab, we're not using a particular part at all. We're just taking the calculated price and we're applying a percentage rate to it, and we're adding that to the price without any cost associated with it. So if you've got a $100 item and you're applying 5%, then the price is going to be 105, but the cost of that product that you created did not change, okay? Let me just catch up with myself. So when I'm done, I don't really need to go into the advanced tab. So when I'm done, I would simply save. And that now is the rush job modifier. Let's go ahead and do the second one. That's a little bit different. On this one, I'm going to select the additional one here, and I cloned it, okay? Instead of doing a rename, I chose to clone it, and then I created a new modifier. So I cloned this one and saved it as this one, additional print labor. I wanted to be able to apply an additional value based on the amount that had to be added, okay? So same kind of concept. This is the additional print labor part, or a modifier. The category, that's the way it's going to be described. This is the question where you would enter the amount of time, and it would be, in this case, it would be entered in hours. So a quarter of an hour would be 0.25. Didn't change the sort level. I'm still using the same spinner that you would choose. The pricing now, in this case, I'm using suggested cost price from a part. Okay, that's all I need. That's all I need to tell the system on this particular tab. Same concept here. I need to choose a product or products, and I just simply, for illustration purposes, chose to apply it to the wide format print product. Now, because this one is using a part, I need to tell it which part I'm going to use. So to kind of show you the path that I would go to get there, I would choose the part, choose add, and then I'm coming into labor, and I'm coming down to digital print and print labor, and I would choose add, and that would say this is the part that I'm going to use to calculate the additional print labor that's going to apply. Now, a very crucial step right here, these two guys right here, I don't want anything to be calculated unless this item called quantity applied, which is the value that you would enter off of that spinner. If that value is greater than 0, then I want to use that value as the labor hours that are going to be applied to the print labor part, okay? So this is a very crucial step in creating a modifier where you're using a part, all right? That's basically it. I would save it, and now I have created that particular part, or that particular modifier. The last one that I want to illustrate is one that isn't going to involve any pricing. Okay, so here I would take I took a one that used to be called ground level or something like that, and I renamed it to ground level install. That's the name of the modifier. Same rigmarole here. Here, I'm only using a checkbox. That's the only thing that's needed to say I want to use this particular modifier. The pricing is, again, I'm going to tell it to use this formula. But notice, This is important. If you're cloned an existing one that has a use this formula in it, since we're not applying any price to use this modifier, we want to make sure that the formula, any formula content that was here, has been eliminated. So if you cloned one that was using this formula, just make sure that you delete what was there, and in that case, it will not apply any price for using this ground level install. Same rigmarole on the selecting the products, and no parts are involved. Okay, so that's the 3 modifiers. Now, if we come back to this estimate, and I'm going to edit it. So on line 2, I had the basic product, filled in the parameters. Come over here to add-ons. Okay, this is a list of the add-ons that can be chosen for this particular product. So I entered a value of 5 for 5%. If I wanted to change that to 10%, I would just change the value, and it will restate the price. And that's how you would use that one. So if I wanted to use this one, but I wanted to change the hours for the additional print from 1/4 of an hour to 1/2 an hour, then it recalculates, and so on. Come down to the 3rd one. It just shows that I did a checkbox, and there's no value, no price that was associated with it. So that kind of gives you a flavor of how these work, how they appear. Now, I'm going to look and see, hang on one second. Okay. There isn't anybody on the call that is using the V3 database according to our logs. Because of that, I am going to skip doing this same thing for that other version of the software in the interest of time. So let me stop here before we create make any modifications for how you decide whether to hide or the bullet points on the estimates and work orders. Let me just pause and entertain any questions at all on anything that we've covered so far.
Paul, it's Paula.
Yeah.
And
Hi, Paula.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
I'm good. I'm sorry, Lyndon, I had to make a switch.
Okay.
I don't see any questions posted in the question box.
All right. All right. So now let's. I'm just going to jump again. I'm skipping the. Illustrating the same exact thing, but using the V3 data set. Now, the process of deciding whether or not to hide some of these or to hide a modifier so that it doesn't appear on the estimate or invoice or work order The default is that if you don't explicitly exclude a modifier from being removed from those three, it's going to appear. So if we look at this, the only one that I have specifically excluded is the rush charge. So that's what I'm going to illustrate. And you'll see why the additional print labor and why the print labor is the install is included on them all. Okay, so let's go back to product setup, and now I'm going to go over to user constants in the first column. So again, setup, pricing, setup, all pricing, and then I'm coming over to user constants. Okay, and I'm going to look specifically in the second column for universal product options. And now I need to scroll down this list. Okay, here we go. Let me edit this so we can see it. I'm going to see if I can't widen this out a little bit. Well, never mind. Where you see the phrase hidden estimate modifiers, what that is referring to is I want to hide the modifiers on estimates and work orders based on the content of this value field, okay? So what I have said here is I want to hide the modifier for additional finishing labor. We didn't demonstrate it. We want to hide the modifier for additional mounting labor. I didn't illustrate it either. And we want to hide the modifier for additional charge. And then lastly, the one that I do want to demonstrate is the rush job did not appear, the bullets did not appear because of this phrase that I added to this list, okay? Now, what's really subtle and hard to see is that this begins with a quote, double quote, and then it has to have an asterisk, then the name of the modifier code, and a concluding asterisk. Then I can go to the next one. If there's a second one, I can go to the third one. I can go to the fourth one, and there can be as many modifiers that will be excluded based on the content of this list, okay? So the only one that's relevant for the things that we've talked about is the addition of this one. The additional, this one here applies uniquely to work orders. And if I look at that one, the only one that's excluded is one that we didn't demonstrate for additional mounting labor. Again, it has to be enclosed in quotes, it has to begin and end with an asterisk, and then the name of the modifier in between. So it's easy to decide, or not to decide, but it's easy to implement hiding. Okay, And again, the text field here, or not the text field, but the value field, that can be by just clicking on the dot, dot, dot. That list can be, it can be as long as you want it to be. So with all of that said, now if we come back, save that, and close out of the setup stuff here. That explains, because I had rush jobs in here, that explains why that didn't appear. And on the work order that I didn't have up open, if I do a preview, okay. So the work order basically is just showing, this is the first line item. Notice that the rush job appears on the work order, but it didn't appear. It didn't appear on the second one. Go back to the work order for the third one. You should see in every case the addition of the modifier. There's the print labor, the ground level. This is the fifth line item where I simply illustrated all three, the use of all three of the modifiers. So for the work order, I wasn't excluding anything related to the three modifiers that we created to illustrate. So
Paul?
again, that process, yeah, that
Oh, I'm
process.
so sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Denise has a question. She asked if hidden estimate modifier is not shown on the universal product, I think it says option. I can't see the rest of it. Option, how do I add it?
On her, which is, I think what I'm hearing her say is in the setup, pricing setup, all pricing, under user constants. Are you seeing product info, Denise?
I don't have control, so I can't unmute her, Paul.
Let me.
My dashboard is totally different. I can't see the attendees.
Okay, Denise, you should be able to. You're unmuted now. Can you clarify what you're asking and what you're not seeing? She must not have a.
Yes. When I go into universal product options,
Yeah.
I am not showing that hidden work order modifier or hidden estimate modifier on the list.
Okay. I had to scroll down quite a bit to find it. So you're not seeing either of these two lines?
No, I have nothing to that effect.
Okay. Hang on a second. I don't have. When you do an estimate for wide format print, is that the product are you using, or are you using one called digital print? Does your pricing, this is, I guess, is the question. I'm wondering if
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm wondering if maybe you're using D3, because I didn't have the
I don't have V3. I checked. I have 2.67.
okay, then that could be because of the age of that data set. I would suggest that you reach out to one of the consulting folks to see if the feasibility of adding that hidden capability.
Okay.
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 I would try to do it myself, but I don't have access to the older, to the older data sets.
All right. Very good.
Okay.
Denise, if
Sorry
you
about
if you want to send me an email, consulting@cirrus.com, I will run it by management.
Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, you can go ahead and put Denise back on mute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We've got about 10 minutes or so if anything else comes up. If not, I certainly don't want to keep everybody. So have a great day, rest of the day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Yeah, take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.